Okay, we are going to share screens. There we go. And I will try not to forget to keep an eye on the dialog box to see if anybody has joined in. I'm gonna put that over like that, because then I think I can still see. Well, I'll pull it out if somebody else comes in. How about that? So, ce soir, we don't have as much to do this week as we had last week. A couple of announcements, which if you've looked at the news item on GoView, you already know. But just to remind you, I am getting caught up. The composition module will be available by tomorrow night, or at least by Thursday morning. The quizzes, the quiz for you guys in 1002 will be available sometime tomorrow night, and I'll set up WebSam tonight, and tonight and tomorrow I'll try to get all of the PowerPoints and scripts and links put in the right place. We have things in a slightly different order than the class was set up for, so I'm having to split lessons up a little tiny bit as we go. But anyway, there may be some overlap occasionally, but just don't worry about it. And I think that's about it. So thanks for bearing with me. I will also be digging back into email tonight. Most of the emails that I saw and wasn't able to go ahead and respond to had been answered with my big message yesterday, but if yours was not answered, don't worry, I will get to you, and if there's some graded component depending on you hearing back from me, don't worry, we will adjust something so that that doesn't count against you, as long as you wrote to me, you know, in good time and in good faith. But if you're waiting on me, you won't be penalized for my slowness at getting back to everybody. So, voilà. Ce soir, on va faire 5B, 5B1. I'm going to talk about the weather and learn some new numbers. It's going to be a way less intense week, material-wise, than last week. You will notice that on WebSam this week you will have some video activities. I didn't give you any video activities last week because there was so much structural stuff to cover, and I wanted you to be sure and practice that. But this week there will be a few video activities, so be sure and be keeping up on the video. We won't always be able to do video activities. There's just maybe 2 other weeks, I think, this semester where you have 3 sections to do, and those weeks we probably won't do video activities either. So, voilà. Vous allez tourner, s'il vous plaît, à la page 196, ou bien simplement regarder avec moi, parce que je l'ai déjà ouvert. Ou bon, j'ai pas ouvert, mais je l'ai mis. Voilà. Alors, and I will zoom in a couple minutes here. It doesn't give us very many choices for zooming in, but bon ben, il faut se débrouiller, hein? We have to just deal with it. So, voilà. I'm gonna zoom in, and maybe that will help you guys. Alors, ou peut-être pas. Oh, it's not gonna let me zoom with my handy keyboard command. I thought it let me last week. Obviously it didn't, and I'm just remembering it wrong. Voilà. I will try to get the Camtasia video more clear this week. So hopefully that will be the case. And if you need to make this bigger on your screen, you should be able to zoom in a little bit if you're watching the recording later. Or make the video on YouTube big if you want to. And hopefully I was successful at making it not blurry or not as blurry. Voilà. So, I'm talking a lot in English. On va faire un peu de français maintenant, non? Alors, quel temps fait-il? Up where I live in South Carolina, I'm right outside Clemson, South Carolina, and it actually looked like this last week for us. So, il a neigé la semaine dernière ici. Jeudi, ou je veux dire vendredi, samedi, puis pour la plupart. Et voilà, je ne sais pas quelle température on avait, etc. Mais il faisait quand même frisqué, which you won't see in your vocab list, but that's what French people say sometimes if they want to say, oh, chilly. Ça fait frisqué, il fait frisqué. Alors, the one thing about the weather expressions is that you have a lot of expressions that can only be expressed one way. You'll notice a bunch of expressions where you can use faire, et c'est toujours avec il singulier, il fait, just like we would say, it is nice out, it is 30 degrees, or whatever. So it's always with third person singular, masculin, il. Then you have certain expressions that use être, and you have certain expressions where you have a specific verb of its own, like il neige. D'accord? So the best thing for these is to keep them intact and use them in their entirety each time you're practicing with them. The best way to cement anything is to create with that component. That's not going to be as easy to do with these because you can't take as many liberties with these expressions as you can with a lot of the stuff that we do. But still using them in your homework, of course, and you'll be needing to use them a bit in your voice board and in your discussion board. So really try to use them as they are here, and you can exchange some of the words at the end of il fait, you see, and using them over and over will be your best way of cementing them. Voilà. Alors, on allait parler des mois plutôt. Pour tous les mois, c'est assez simple. Décembre, janvier, février, l'hiver, winter, n'est-ce pas? Puis vous avez l'été, summer, oui. Juin, juillet, août. Août is wacky. You can say ou, you can say août, you can say out. All three are accepted. Where I used to live, we said août. So you're going to hear me say août, and you can keep saying août if you want to, or one of those other possibilities. So it's kind of regional, except that I don't know where they say août, and I don't know where they say ou. But where I used to live in Tours, in the Loire Valley, we say août. Alors, voilà. That's the hardest month to say, so I don't think we need to go over too much more pronunciation. I hope you all know how to find your vocab list on the super site, where you can actually access the sound bites so that you can repeat the words to yourself or with the book, with the v-text or whatever. So that is pretty helpful sometimes. Alors, ce qu'on va faire d'abord, c'est de regarder un tout petit peu plus pour les saisons et les temps qu'il fait dans les saisons. Alors ici, on n'avait pas parlé du temps. En été, il fait chaud, n'est-ce pas? Il fait du soleil. En hiver, oh, j'arrive pas à le... Voilà. En hiver, il fait froid. Il neige, pour la plupart. Peut-être chez vous, non, n'est-ce pas? Chez vous, il fait un peu plus frais que d'habitude, mais il va pleuvoir peut-être plus que normal, mais sinon, il va pas faire super froid, non? Alors, au printemps, mars, avril, mai. Mars is one of the few words where we pronounce the final S, so that one you might put a little star by as you're practicing your pronunciation too. Il pleut, n'est-ce pas? Puisqu'il pleut, elle a son imperméable et son parapluie, n'est-ce pas? Alors, I keep forgetting that I can't scroll the normal way. En automne, septembre, octobre, novembre, vous avez le temps nuageux, n'est-ce pas? Il fait du vent, the wind is blowing, oui. Et il fait frais, n'est-ce pas? Une chose que j'allais mentionner en fait, ils avaient fait ici, ils vous ont donné, il fait bon. You can use that to say the weather is good or warm. You can actually use it in almost any kind of weather if you're having an unseasonably warm day or a nice day for whatever season. So if it's in the middle of winter and there's just a really pretty day where maybe it's a little bit warmer than normal, but still not warm by most people's standards, you can say il fait bon. So that one's a little more flexible. All the others, use them as they're translated, and that's your best bet. Alors, on allait faire aujourd'hui un peu à l'écoute. Oh, d'abord, on va parler des fêtes. We're going to be playing with numbers today. For the months and the dates, you don't need very big numbers. We're doing the numbers from 101 and higher. But for months, the biggest number you're going to need is 30 or 31, right? So when we talk about the date, we use an ordinal number. So premier is the same as our saying first. D'accord? Now we do that all the way through the month. In French, you only do it for the first day. C'est le 1er octobre, c'est le 1er janvier, c'est le 1er août, ou quoi que ce soit, n'est-ce pas? Then when you go on with the other dates, you're just going to say the numbers normally. So c'est le 2 mai, c'est le 15 mars. We would still translate it the way we're going to say it. But in French, you don't have to keep using the ordinal. You're just going to use it with the first of the month. D'accord? On va parler des fêtes françaises, je pense. Voilà. Alors, on va aller sur le V-texte pour voir comment ils ont fait. Très bien. Et ça, je pense que je peux faire le zoom plus... Ouais, voilà. Yay, lets me zoom when we're doing the activities at least. Alors, pour la fête nationale française, vous allez donner, comme dans le livre, on va parler de la date de chaque fête. Alors, fête, you may have learned before, means party. It also means a holiday. It can also mean holiday in the less official sense. So it can mean a holiday as in a calendar holiday. It can also mean a holiday like, oh, we took a holiday this weekend. We went to the beach. Voilà. Et on va parler de la saison de chaque fête aussi. D'accord? Alors, vous pouvez bien sûr faire ça... Oh, j'arrive pas à le monter là. Voilà. Vous pouvez bien sûr faire ça vous-même sur Vitex plus tard pour réviser. Nous, on va faire au moins un peu ensemble. Alors, pour la fête nationale française, et ce que je vais faire, c'est de prendre... on va faire un petit tableau, n'est-ce pas? So we'll do a little impromptu blackboard here so that you have the dates. I don't know how interested you are in the dates, but we will give them to you regardless. Alors pour numéro 1, la fête nationale française. Do you know when the French Independence Day is? The day they stormed the Bastille, n'est-ce pas? The 14th of July. Alors en français, on va dire le 14 juillet. D'accord? Exactement comme ça. And as I said, you're not going to need the ordinal number. You're just going to use the normal number. And if I'm translating this, I'm going to say the 14th of July. D'accord? Alors, c'est dans quelle saison ça, le 14 juillet? Je vais bouger ça un tout petit peu, pouce pouce, et je vais poser ça un tout petit peu, voilà. Alors, c'est dans quelle saison, le 14 juillet? C'est en été, n'est-ce pas? C'est très bien. L'indépendance des États-Unis, alors ça c'est beaucoup plus facile, j'espère que vous savez. bien sûr, c'est le 4 juillet. Et on sait déjà que c'est l'été aussi, n'est-ce pas? That one's going to be summer also, of course. Poisson d'avril. April Fool's Day in France. Poisson d'avril. If you go to school in France, you might have somebody stick a paper fish on your back. Hopefully they won't stick a real fish on your back because ça pue. Mais they might stick a paper fish on your back. They do play jokes on each other too a little bit, but not to the extent I don't think that we do, and we really don't too much anymore. Not like we did when I was little, for example. So that was a long time ago. So on va plus parler de ça. Alors pour numéro 3, poisson d'avril. Alors c'est en avril, bien sûr. Le. So what am I going to do since it's the first of the month? Now I have to use my ordinal. D'accord? Le 1er avril. And I'm just going straight to the month. I don't have to say of January or whatever. Et puis, c'est en quelle saison le 1er avril? C'est au printemps, n'est-ce pas? C'est au printemps. Noël. Alors ça c'est facile, bien sûr. C'est le... So if you're watching the video, you might pause each time to give yourself a chance to figure out how to say it in French. Theoretically, everybody should have reviewed their numbers coming into this chapter. I'm sorry, I forgot to remind you. So if you want to go review those. Hey, Laura's here! Oh, can you hear me, Laura? Hi, Laura! Yay! Il y a quelqu'un là. Well, je vais continuer and let her catch up. So anyway, if you have a chance before you dig into your WebSam this week, go and review your numbers from 1 to 100, and that should help you with all these dates and everything. Laura, tu m'entends? Can you hear me, Laura? Push your microphone button if you want to talk, or you're welcome. Oh, yay, goody goody. Okay, I'm going to move it over since somebody's here now. I had moved it way over so that it wouldn't be in the way. Oh, that's too bad. You can do what some of the girls did last week if you want to on some of the activities. If you want to join in, you can type your answers or whatever. And voilà. Alors, on va continuer un tout petit peu. We're not going to finish this whole activity because we want to go ahead and get to other stuff tonight. Mais on vient de parler de numéro 4. Alors, pour parler de la date, I said before, all you have to do is put le, and then you're going to put the regular number, and then your month. D'accord? Le 25 décembre. So again, if you're watching the video, you can pause these if you want to kind of give yourself a second to say the numbers and go review your numbers. Voilà. Pour numéro 5, il y a un autre qui est français. Il y en a plus qui sont français. C'est quand même pas bien d'avoir qu'une fête française sur la liste. They should have given us more stuff. Well, there aren't that many. Now that I think about it, there aren't that many holidays that are only celebrated in France and we wouldn't know about, so a lot of them are shared. So, okay. Le Saint-Valentin, alors. C'est la fête du Saint-Valentin. Oh, on n'a pas parlé de la saison. So, what saison? C'est dans quelle saison, Noël? C'est en hiver. And again, pause the video if you need to give yourself a chance to figure out the answers. Pour la Saint-Valentin, c'est la même date que nous. Alors, c'est le... And again, we only need the special form of the number for the first of the month. For every other day of the month, I can just use the normal number. So, la Saint-Valentin, c'est le 14 février, si je peux faire mon accent là. Et puis, c'est dans quelle saison? C'est en hiver. C'est vers la fin d'hiver, n'est-ce pas? Alors, très bien. Vous pouvez quand même trouver cette activité vous-même pour continuer ou pour faire le début si vous n'étiez pas ici. Voilà, on va laisser tomber. Et oui, on va quitter. Voilà, très bien. Alors pour continuer un tout petit peu, on allait faire le écouter. I really wanted to do the écouter because I think the more chances you guys have to listen to me, the better. Not because I'm so wonderful to listen to, but just because it's really good to listen to various voices. And so if we have time at the end, what I might do is come back to this activity and just do it really quick at the very end after we've finished our numbers and everything. And you can use it as a listening activity, and actually that would be easy to access then because it would be right at the end of the video, so you could go straight there if you wanted to. So Laura, help me remember that I'm going to do this activity after we're all done. Alors, the pressure. Voilà, on va continuer un tout petit peu et je vais défaire le zoom dans un moment là. Voilà. So as I said, we are going to be doing more with the video on weeks. Well, you should always watch the video because it's really good listening practice. And you have your kind of a little synthèse here with these little slides that they show you each lesson. So be sure and look that over, and be sure and look over the questions that they give you before you watch the video. That's going to give you a really good context before you jump into the video. So even if you don't want to read through this little mini dialogue or mini script, at least read through the questions. The questions are going to give your head a little idea about what the video is going to be about. And any kind of fertilizing of the ground that you can do before something like that, the better. That way you're not jumping in and just making your head figure it all out cold. So give yourself a little bit of a context. Read over the questions first before you jump in. I'm going to keep repeating that for various things on the quizzes and tests and stuff. If you have some kind of a reading activity or audio activity, read through this stuff first before digging in, and again, it gives you a little bit of a context. So be sure and do the video. And this time you're going to have a few activities based on the video. Last week we didn't because we had so much ground to cover dans les structures, n'est-ce pas? But this week we will have some activities on that. So most of the time we will have a couple of activities on the video. Alors, on va parler des jardins publics français. Surtout, ça c'est très intéressant en fait, les statistiques qui sont ici. C'est très important le parc ou les jardins publics. Il y en a énormément en fait. Moi je trouve qu'il y a beaucoup plus qu'aux États-Unis. I think there are a lot more gardens and parks in France than there are here. Not necessarily gardens, but public parks. They just make a point of having them kind of all over. And it's very important to have ce qu'on appelle espace vert. They like to have green space in all the towns and along a lot of the major boulevards and things like that. So it is really, really pretty. And there are a lot of various gardens. And I was supposed to pull up a couple, but I neglected to do so. So, Laura, I hid your dialog box. There we go. But I'll try to keep checking in case you have a question. So, they talk about the Jardin du Luxembourg. So you can look these up obviously too. The Jardin du Luxembourg. My first time in France, we studied in Paris for a month before we went on to where we were going to live. And it was in September, so we always did our homework here around the lac, around the boat pond in the Jardin du Luxembourg. And they really do come and play with sailboats in the boat pond. It's really pretty cool. Alors, il y en a un autre qu'ils ont mentionné, c'est les Tuileries. Last time I was in France, this was my favorite garden because I lived close to it, les Tuileries. There's a big area that's green and you can walk through and you can just sit on benches and stuff. And the same thing in the Luxembourg, they have that as well in the Luxembourg. Um, and then there also is an area where you can sit um, around the reflecting pool or the lac. And it's just really nice and peaceful. And they have these metal chairs that you may have seen or you may not have seen, and some of them are angled so that they kind of recline. And that is super, super nice to sit in one of those reclining chairs and read a book or do your homework or whatever in France. Now, a couple of gardens that I'm familiar with, I wanted to show you too. Attends. I hope we can find a picture of this, or some pictures. Oh, that's a picture of it. I have some pictures, but I'm a little bit between computers right now, so I can't get to my photos as easily as usual. If somebody will remind me, I'll try to pull up some of those photos so you can see a picture of this park. It's a really pretty little park, and it has a little brook that goes through the park. And we used to go study here when I studied in Tours, which is where we went after Paris. So I've studied in Tours several times, or lived in Tours several times. So that's a nice little park. Et puis, this is probably not as interesting as I want it to be. Voilà. L'autre parc dont j'allais vous parler, c'est ce parc. This is the Musée de Beaux-Arts in Tours. It's a small museum. It's big for Tours, but and Tours is this town in the Loire Valley, which I lived in a bunch of times. But in particular, they have this ginormous cedar tree that was a gift to Napoleon from Lebanon, which is really cool. So it's a really, really old tree. And I wish there were some close-ups because they actually have, oh, there's some. They have these beams holding its branches up because it's so old. And the branches are so heavy that they would break off if they let them go. So there's also an elephant at this park. It's a very random thing. Basically, Barnum and Bailey came to Tours, and this elephant, Fritz, went crazy and started storming the streets. And unfortunately, they had to euthanize him. And so, for whatever reason, they stuffed him and put him in the garden of the Musée de Beaux-Arts. And so the cathedral is right next to that garden. I'm going back to the textbook now. The cathedral is right next to that garden, and little French kids love to go say hi to Fritz after Mass on Sundays, those who go to Mass. So that's a kind of a different garden experience that we might not have over here. So, voilà. When you have a minute, you should look over this stuff about cyclisme too. Obviously, cycling is incredibly important in France. It's got a huge place in the culture. And I did several bike tours in France, and when you're on a bike, people come and talk to you all the time. It's kind of like going to the park with a dog here in the States, where people who wouldn't normally come right up to you and start talking to you would come up and just start conversing with you because they'd see your bike and they thought that was the coolest thing ever, that an American would be riding through France. So that was pretty cool. Alors, très bien. On va parler des nombres de 101 et au-delà. The cool thing about these numbers is that if you go back and review 0 to 99, which I used to have that page written down, but it's obviously earlier in the book and it'll be pretty easy for you to find in the index or in the table of contents. But if you go back and review those, you've got all the hard stuff already done. Because everything we're going to do from here on out, except for a couple of vocab words, is based on those numbers that you already learned how to do. So you may remember that when you got to, oh, it made it small again, that's weird. That when you got to numbers like 70, you had to do something wacky, right? You had to say 70, n'est-ce pas? And when you got to a number like 80, you basically had to say 80, n'est-ce pas? And when you got to 90, things were even weirder, right? So 90, so 4, oh, 90, n'est-ce pas? So 4 20s plus 10. So all of that is still going to happen. So whenever you have anything in the tens spot, you're still going to have to do those. So you definitely should bone up on those. But everything else is going to be like you've already practiced, and it's going to be pretty easy. So as I said, there's just a couple of new vocab words. One of them is 100, which you should have already known, but for 100, n'est-ce pas? If I only have 100, I don't have to say anything. I can just say 100. If I have more than 100, I need to say a number. So 200, 300, 400, etc. Je vais zoomer un peu plus. Maybe I should zoom again. Oh, the 400 is awful. Okay, well, let me know if that just drives you absolutely crazy when you're watching the video, and we'll try to figure something out. But the zoom is really stupid on vText. I'm just going to say it. It's stupid. Alors, comme j'ai dit, vous allez mettre juste le numéro 200, 300, 400, etc. When you get to 1000, the same thing happens. 1000 means 1,000. It's a little misleading, right? But just remember, it's 1,000. When you get to million, that's the same number, same word as we use, so that kind of is easy on you. For 1000, the same thing. When you just have 1,000, you don't have to say anything. So 1000, 1100, etc. If I want to say more than 1,000, so 2,000, etc., then I need the number. So 2,000, 5,000, 100,000, etc. And the same structures that work in English work in French. That is, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but when we get to big numbers, there is one difference. We're using a decimal instead of a comma. So if you saw a price in France, you might see €4,000, 50 cents. D'accord? So that part's going to be switched. But once you get past that little weirdness, if you've noticed, when we count in English, we always go by those threes. So if I have 32,987, I'm going to pause in between each set, 32,987. If I add some more on here, I'm going to say 32,987,110. So I'm always going in those groups. If I have another number at the front, same thing, 532,987,000. Same thing is gonna, million, sorry, I can count, 532 million. En français, we're going to do the same thing. We're not going to jump right up there and do that huge number when we've just started. But just to give you an example, the same thing would happen. 532 millions, 987,110. D'accord? So you kind of have a little breathing space in between each set. So let those decimals, which again are the same as our commas, guide you. D'accord? Now there are some rules about when to use S's or not on the ends of these numbers. Basically, 1000 never has an S on it. D'accord? If 100 or million or billion, if you get to billion, you want to use those, ou des milliards, je veux dire. If 100 or million gets to be more than one, then you're going to add an S if you're writing it out. Now this will be something that will probably lose you a couple tenths of a point here and there on the VTech or in WebSam. I'm going to try not to have it be picky on the quiz, but it might just not let me offer you two different forms. But if you think about it, how many times do you write out numbers in English? Not very often, right? Mostly just on checks, which you guys pretty much don't even touch anymore, right? Um, so the average French person actually doesn't know this rule. Or at least you're very likely, if you talk to 2 or 3 people on the street in Paris, I guarantee you'd meet one in those 2 or 3 people that didn't know when to use an S and when not. So just like in English, we have lots of things that we don't use on a regular basis and we might forget how to do it because we never write numbers out or we never say it that way or something like that. So this isn't super key it's not key at all for communication, but just be aware of it for if you have to write out any numbers in WebSam or on the quizzes or anything. So voilà. L'autre chose qu'on allait regarder alors, so if I take a bunch of these off, as soon as I have my hundreds more than 100, right, I'm just going to use the number like I normally would, 500, and then I'm going to go on with my number, just like I would in English, 532. D'accord? En fait, quand on le dit vite, on va dire 532. D'accord? So you're not generally going to hear this 5. When you first learned your numbers, hopefully somebody told you not to pronounce the Q at the end of 5 if you've got something coming up that has a consonant. And the same thing's going to happen here. So 532, etc. Voilà, those are the essentials, really. It's actually pretty basic. So what we're going to do, je vais pousser ça, voilà, is I'm going to try to get it to scroll. Oh là là, il ne veut pas bouger là, il veut pas glisser. C'est ça le glissement. Voilà. Très bien. You do have a little bit of vocab up here because they're going to have you doing a little bit of math with your numbers. D'accord? So these are pretty straightforward. And honestly, they do say formal and informal here. Most people just stick with these when they're talking. Maybe you would hear your professor, your math professor, use this rather than this, but they use them interchangeably enough that I wasn't aware that they were considered informal and formal. I thought they were basically interchangeable. It made sense once I noticed this a few years ago in this textbook, actually, but it's not super crucial. So don't worry too much about the informal versus the formal. Just know what they mean and be able to use them as you're doing some math in French. Et nous, on va regarder les nombres ici. Alors, 10 000. Oh, on va le faire sur le WebSam, n'est-ce pas? Eh oh, réveille-toi. Voilà. Voilà, très bien. Alors, 10 000, and as I said, you're going to get used to this decimal treatment eventually. Your eye will just go ahead and morph it the way it needs to morph it. So 620. Now remember, we're going to go one at a time. So, qu'est-ce que vous allez dire? And again, if you need to pause the video before you do these, then do that. Oh, I actually have to check on something. This is funny. See, okay, how long have I been doing French? I'm not going to do the math, but I've been doing French since 1978. Whoa, that's a long time. And I'm just checking. Oui, I thought so. If you're coming up with something else after those, then you drop the S. I don't remember if I said that or not. So you're going to have the S on the plural hundreds and the plural thousands, but not, or on the plural millions, I mean. But if you have something coming afterwards, then you're supposed to drop the S again. That's the part that's going to be hard to remember, just like right then when I had to go check it. So, oh, attends. So see, I've been doing French for all that time, and I still have to check things once in a while. But that's a good example of something that really isn't needed for communication, and like I said, the average French person probably isn't going to know that rule. So that's my defense, is that the average French person wouldn't know it either. Alors pour 620, on va faire alors 600 without an S or with an S. Without, because I have something coming up. Oh, 20. D'accord? 620. Et c'est tout. 620. 365. Alors, c'est le même principe, n'est-ce pas? Same idea. 300 with an S or not. Not, because I have something else. D'accord? 42,000. This is very similar to the example, right? Alors, 42,000. D'accord? And 1000 never takes an S. 1,392,000. Alors, for millions, I do have to use the number with 1. D'accord? Alors, 1 million, n'est-ce pas? 300. D'accord? Très bien. These hyphens are something too that once in a while I have to go check them. But again, just hardly ever write numbers out. So I'm not super worried about you guys knowing those. It's not going to be crucial for communication. But you should be aware of it. So later, especially those of you who are majoring or minoring, you will need to know that. Alors, il faut que j'arrête de dire tout le temps. Je dis tout le temps, n'est-ce pas? So 171. So we said if it's just 1, I don't have to use a number. 100. And for 70, I'm going to say 60, 10, right? So, oh, pardon. 10. Oh, 71. D'accord. I thought it was 170 for a second. Et puis, 200 million. Il y a rien de plus facile. 200. Oh, j'arrive pas à taper, c'est tout. 200 millions. D'accord? That gives you an idea. Quelle heure il est? Oh, we're okay. I was thinking we were running late, so we can go ahead and finish this one. 480. So again, pause the video if you want to give yourself a chance. 480. D'accord? Et puis, you know what? You need an S on 80, I think. See? This is really crazy. I need to go review my numbers. I think you have to put an S on the end just like you do with 100. Alors, so we're going to put parentheses around the S, and one of you guys can look it up for me and tell everybody Madame Clay didn't remember when to put an S on the end of one of her numbers. Alors, I keep starting to say them in French, and that wouldn't give you a chance to guess. Alors, 1,789. Again, for 1, I don't need a number, so 1000, n'est-ce pas? 700. 80. Oh, I don't need a hyphen here. I know that for sure. 89. Voilà. Très bien. 400. C'est super facile, n'est-ce pas? 400. And what do I need? Un S. Oh, I started to say it. 8 million. 8 millions. D'accord. 8 millions. 1000 is the one that never takes an S, right? 5,053. 5,000. 5,000. And I'm just going to skip over it like I would in English, right? I don't need to say anything for the hundreds. So 500, 50, 12. D'accord? Voilà. Très bien. Again, usually when we jump in on these, the people who have the biggest trouble are the people who need to go back and review their numbers earlier. So take a few minutes to go back and review those. Do a couple of the activities in the v-text or something to kind of refresh your memory. Because those, again, that's the hardest stuff. This 89 or 71, those are the parts that are the hardest about this. D'accord? The stuff that we're doing today is actually way easier than that stuff was. So be sure and give yourself a chance to go look at that and refresh your memory before you jump in on the activities. Oui, on va quitter. Merci. Voilà. Alors, on allait faire quelques activités aussi ici. Encore des activités, je veux dire. Alors, attends, parce que I wanted to do these in a specific order, and I'm looking at my notes. Oh, there was one other thing I was going to mention. Actually, we'll get my little impromptu blackboard back over here. Alors, the other thing I was going to mention was, if you want to, yes, if anybody was wondering whether you can say numbers the way we do sometimes, 1989 for a year, for example, you can certainly do that. And they do tend to do that just about as much as we do, but generally only on years. So if I was telling a price, so it was the year 1989, I'm going to break it into two, 1989. So I do still have to say my cent, d'accord? 1989. D'accord? So I still need to say cent, okay? Now, if this were a price, then I don't remember where my euro is. I used to remember where my euro is. I don't remember today. Oh well. On va mettre le dollar alors. Alors si c'était, if it were $1,989, they're going to tend to say it the way we were saying those other numbers, rather than breaking it here. You will hear that once in a while, but normally it's pretty much only with years. D'accord? Now when they get to the 2000s, they do like we do, and they say 2016, par exemple, 2002, oh pardon, etc. D'accord? You're not going to hear anybody say 20 so after, maybe when we're in the 22nd century, we'll hear people saying 21 cents, ou quelque chose comme ça. Mais pour l'instant, c'est juste pour les 19, les 18, les 17, les 16, etc. D'accord? And chiefly for the years, not so much when you see the number used a different way. D'accord? Or if I were counting people, and I said there were 1,989 people, ça aussi, je mettrais 1989. Okay? Voilà. So that's just an aside that I had made a note a few years ago, because usually somebody wants to ask that at some point. So if you were curious about that, now you know. On va regarder activité 1. So these are a little easier. They're writing it out for you, and you just have to... Eh oh! Il voulait pas que je clique. Il voulait pas répondre à mon clic. So now, these aren't as tricky when they're written out. They're trickier when you hear somebody. And if we were in a live class, that's what I usually would do, is have a little dictate at this point where you guys would try to write out the numbers that I would say. So we can do that if you want to in a little bit, and then you can just pause the video if you want to. Alors, here, read it out to yourself if you need to. Use your v-text to compare. And what do I end up with? 252. 252, n'est-ce pas? 400 avenue Malbon. Ce sont tous des adresses, n'est-ce pas? These are all addresses, n'est-ce pas? So, 400, il n'y a rien de plus facile. 400 avenue Malbon. 177 ans. Alors, 177, again, the stuff that's the most complicated is the stuff that you already had, right? 77, so 10, that is 60, 10, 7, Alors 177, ouais. 156, hein. Avenue des Gaulois. Oh, pardon, j'ai sauté. 156 boulevard Saint-Marc. Alors 156, n'est-ce pas? 688. Qu'est-ce que vous dites? 688. Voilà. 392. So again, pause these if you need to give yourself a chance to guess. 392. Vous allez avoir 392. Alors, 80. I mean, 4 20s, 12. 92. So if you're tempted to put an 8 there, but I've got 12 coming up, right? Alors, 80 plus 12. Ouais, 92. Voilà. Alors, ça c'était assez facile, assez simple. Oui, on va quitter. Et puis l'autre que je voulais qu'on fasse, c'était celui-là. Celui-là, c'est un peu plus difficile. Je vais pas faire celui-là avec les maths. Hein? You can do the math one yourself. I think some of the ones that I'm going to be assigning on the website, you have to do some math. So you'll need to write out those commands, right? So 155 plus 310 font da 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 da. N'est-ce pas? Alors ici, on va simplement écrire les nombres. So again, we're writing these out, which is quite artificial because normally we don't write out huge numbers. At least not anymore since people don't write checks to the extent that they used to. I wouldn't be surprised if none of you had ever written a check. You probably have once in a great while, but I wouldn't be surprised if you haven't. Alors, ce sont les habitants, d'accord? So how many people live in each of these cities, d'accord? Alors, Toulouse. Alors, so think to yourself and remember what I said about going by threes. So give yourself a little space between each trio. Alors, 300. Oh. 300. Very similar to the one we just did. 4. Oh là là, j'arrive pas à taper là. 98. And then what? 1000. Ouais. 400. And then 23. Easy peasy. 23. Voilà. 398 423. D'accord? Abidjan. À Abidjan, il y a 2 millions de... Oh, pardon. 2 millions 880... Oh, pardon, 60. 60. 877. Je peux compter, hein. 77. What do we need now? 1000. Et puis, the last trio, 940. Oh, j'arrive pas à taper. 48. Voilà. D'accord? Et Lyon, qu'est-ce que vous me donnez? So break it into trios again. This one's easier. So 450. What do we need next? 1187. Voilà. D'accord? 453 187. I have to look at the number. This is crazy. When I read it to you afterwards, I can't look at this part. It freaks me out. I just look at the number. It's easier. So, that's really weird. À Québec, combien d'habitants il y a à Québec? So again, do it in trios. 5 Oh, pardon. 110. Alors, 510 000. Ouais. 5... Oh 559. Voilà. 510 559. Marseille. I had kind of a weird time in Marseille. I lost my passport for a little while and I was very, very freaked out. But I found it. Yay! Or not my passport, my youth hostel card. Yeah, I would have been really freaked out if I had lost my passport. Alors, 807,071. 807 000. 71. Voilà. 26,181 à papete. Alors, 26. Oh, pardon. Oh, Suzanne. 26 180. Voilà. Très bien. À Dakar. Où est Dakar? Où se trouve Dakar? Au Sénégal, n'est-ce pas? There's a wacky, wacky, wacky race called the Paris-Dakar. Actually, I haven't heard much about it lately, but we don't hear about it over here. And it's kind of one of those things where you just get there however you possibly can, and people have died on it and stuff because you basically drive these jeeps and stuff through the desert and take a ferry across from Grenada or something to au Maroc, etc. et puis continuer là. So it's pretty long and it's pretty interesting. So some of you, if you like extreme sports or like century runs and stuff like that, or watching that stuff on reality TV, you might enjoy looking at some Paris-Dakar stuff that you might see on YouTube. So just in case, that's called the Paris-Dakar. And I bet all you have to do is enter this. D'accord? And you'll find it. So, à Dakar, il y a 2,476,400. Alors, 2 millions. Oh, pardon. 476 1,400. And what do I need on 400? An S, because nothing else is coming after. À Nice. Nice est super beau, hein? Et il y a beaucoup de touristes, par contre. Mais c'est super beau. Et la plage, il y a beaucoup de petits musées. Il y a un musée pour les œuvres de Matisse, qui est super, super, super bien maintenu, etc. Et c'est très, très beau. Et il y en a d'autres. Alors, 300. Do I need an S or not? Why not? Because I've got something else coming later. 344. What's next? 1000. And then my last trio. 400. Oh, en fait, you don't need a hyphen. 460. Voilà, 460. D'accord? Alors, as I said, the hardest thing about this is the stuff you've already done. So you got to go back probably and review how your 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s work, because that's still the hardest thing. D'accord? This thing about when to use an S and when not to use an S. Again, if you're majoring or minoring, you may or may not need to know that at some point. If you just want French for your requirements or to go and communicate with somebody in France, you don't need to worry about those S's, except for whatever WebSam might make you do. And I will try to remember to be a little less picky about them on the exam, because as you can see, me, my a gazillion years of French behind me, have to stop and think about when I need an S and when I don't, because we just never write numbers out. C'est très bien, c'est assez bizarre d'écrire les nombres comme ça. Alors oui, on va quitter. So, Laura doesn't need to remind me what we were going to do. And Laura, if you don't want to listen to this activity, that is totally fine. I will not be offended or anything. But I'm going to read, actually, j'avais pas trouvé la bonne page. Voilà, très bien. Alors, if you guys want to, you can access this part of the video pretty easily by just going straight to the end and listen to the recording as many times as you want, and just use a piece of paper or something. If you go on WebSam, you might be able to access the activity and just not play the audio and listen to my audio instead. And it might be helpful to listen to my audio and listen to the audio on WebSam. So again, as many different voices and cadences and stuff that you might hear from different people as possible will really help your audio comprehension. So, voilà. Alors, vous allez écouter. Et comme j'ai dit, vous pouvez jouer, vous pouvez faire passer l'enregistrement autant que possible, autant que vous voulez. Play it as many times as you want to get the activity. I'm finding it. Oops, I went too far. Attends, parce que j'ai le script là. Voilà, j'ai le script. Alors c'est assez court, hein. C'est le météo. So it's a weather report. Vous avez les consignes, écoutez le bulletin météorologique et répondez aux questions suivantes. D'accord? It's kind of like listening to a weather report on the radio or something, right? So listen to the weather report and play it a bunch of times if you need to, and try to answer. A couple of these you might be able to answer without listening to the activity, to the recording. But voilà, on y va. Alors, aujourd'hui, vendredi 21 mars, nous commençons le printemps avec une température de 11 degrés. Il n'y a pas de vent, mais il y a quelques nuages. Votre météo du week-end. Samedi, il ne va pas faire soleil. Il va faire frais avec une température de 13 degrés. Dimanche, encore 13 degrés. Mais il va faire un temps épouvantable. Il va pleuvoir toute la journée, alors n'oubliez pas votre parapluie et votre imperméable. Fin. D'accord? So that's a good bit slower than normal speech. And on anytime we do these activities, don't worry, I'm going to go a fair amount slower when we have audios on the quizzes and tests, but I would like you to reach a little bit on these. So these ones that we do during the class sessions, I'm probably going to go at a fairly good clip. But again, that wasn't normal speed at all, so if you understood a little bit of that or a fair amount of that, then you rock, because it's pretty hard to do this kind of thing. Something I forgot to tell you was to, like I said before with the video, if you read through the questions, and if you read them aloud especially, that will help you get ready to listen for what you need to listen for, because a lot of the words in these questions are the same as what you hear in the recording, right? So play that as many times as you want, and try to do the activity. Let me know how it goes if you like, and I'll say these announcements again. Basically, I'm catching up as fast as I can. The composition module will be available tomorrow night or by early Thursday morning at the latest. The quiz will be available tomorrow night at the latest. As soon as I finish my classes tonight, I will set up the websam, and in there and everywhere I'll be posting all the PowerPoints and scripts and links that I can. I have to rearrange a few of those, so I got a little confused earlier and had to stop. So I'm gonna get those straight and figure out which ones you guys need to look at this week. Voilà. And enjoy the week. You do have a little bit less to concentrate on than you did, quite a bit less than last week. And since all we had were those numbers, it should be a week when you can kind of stop and breathe a little bit. And don't worry too much about the composition. When you see the module, you'll be able to read your topic and all of the parameters, and there's a lot of information there to help you. And of course, I'm here to help you. So it's not due until a week from Sunday. So don't worry too much. You've got that coming up, but you'll be fine. Okay? Alors, bonne soirée et à la prochaine. Et je vais continuer avec les mails ce soir aussi. I'll be continuing with all my emails tonight too. Most of the ones that I looked at but didn't get to answer, people had asked questions that I had actually answered in my big note yesterday. So if you're still waiting for an answer on something, as I said at the beginning, I will get to you. And if it's something that a grade is depending on, I will, as long as you wrote me in time originally, I will adjust your grade. So you won't be penalized for it taking a long time for me to get back to you about your question. So don't worry. Voilà. Bonne soirée. Salut Laura. Alors je vais arrêter Camtasia. I'll just do this. That's easier. I gotta find the thing. There it is. Très bien. Alors, arrêtez de faire le partage. Stop. Voilà. Et puis, on va s'arrêter l'enregistrement aussi. Oui.
Recording stopped.
Voilà. Et je vais partir. Alors, salut!